The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. I was standing in the hallway of my parents' house when my sister looked straight into my eyes. Without hesitation, she said, "My credit is terrible, so I used yours." She spoke as if she were commenting on the weather outside. There was no guilt in her voice, no pause to think about what she had done. It sounded casual, almost careless. My father didn't even blink. He barely lifted his head before muttering, "It's not a crime if your family handles things like that." I didn't argue, I didn't shout, I didn't raise my voice at all. Instead, I turned around and walked out the front door, leaving the house behind me along with the heavy silence that followed. That night, I opened my laptop and uploaded the evidence online. By the time morning arrived, my sister's condo was no longer the peaceful place she thought it was. Before I continue the story, please hit the like button. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever experienced something like this, share your story. Hearing your advice reminds me that I'm not alone. My name is Sophia. If you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they would probably call me the dependable daughter, the quiet one, the sister who never causes trouble and always keeps her composure. I'm the person who doesn't yell or create scenes that might ruin the flawless image my family likes to show the world. It's strange how people assume that quietness means weakness. They don't realize that calm water can hide a current strong enough to pull down an entire ship. My sister figured out early in life how to dominate every room she walked into. She's 4 years older than me, louder, flashier, and always craving attention. She grew up believing the spotlight naturally belonged to her. My parents encouraged that belief every step of the way. They applauded when she entered a room. When she threw temper tantrums, they called it passion. When she made reckless decisions, they described it as ambition. Meanwhile, I existed quietly in the background, the supporting character that made her shine even brighter. Our family house in Fairfax looks perfect from the outside. It has sturdy brick walls, neatly trimmed hedges, and a porch light that gives off a warm, welcoming glow. Anyone passing by would think it belonged to a happy family. But inside, everything follows a very specific pattern. There's an unspoken script we all perform. My sister plays the star of the show. My parents sit in the audience cheering her on. And I remain politely off to the side, smiling when expected. 2 weeks before everything unraveled, we gathered there for brunch. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls, and sunlight streamed through the windows, lighting up the dining room. The table was arranged with the good dishes, the ones that only come out for special occasions. My sister arrived late like she always does. She walked in wearing an expensive designer coat that she carried like armor. As soon as she sat down, she started talking about her latest investments, the influential people she had been socializing with, and the trips she had planned. My parents leaned forward with excitement, hanging onto every word. Eventually, she turned her attention toward me. Tilting her head slightly, she asked, "So, are you still working that little finance job?" I let out a small laugh. That's usually how I respond when someone clearly doesn't understand what I actually do. My work revolves around patterns, spotting inconsistencies, finding the details that don't belong. I analyze numbers and behaviors until the truth surfaces. Lies can look polished on the outside, but they always leave traces if you know where to search. Details matter. The truth is rarely loud, but it's always present if you're paying attention. Even during that brunch, I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right. The things my sister said didn't match the lifestyle she was living. The numbers simply didn't add up. Without meaning to, I began doing calculations in my head. It's something I can't turn off. She was spending far more money than she reasonably should have been able to afford. But when family is involved, logic and emotion don't always agree. So I ignored the uneasy feeling in my stomach, just like I had ignored countless smaller warning signs throughout the years. Later that day, I drove back to my apartment in Silver Spring with a sense of unease I couldn't quite explain. My apartment is my sanctuary. It's quiet and uncomplicated. No one competes for space there. No one demands attention. I brewed a cup of tea and sat by the window, trying to convince myself that I had been imagining things. But the truth has a way of revealing itself, usually when you least expect it. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a notification, and in that moment, I knew exactly what that uneasy feeling had been trying to warn me about. The alert appeared on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing suspicious payment patterns at work. It was a credit inquiry I didn't recognize. Most people would have panicked immediately. But instead, something inside me grew quiet, like the moment when scattered puzzle pieces finally snapped together into a clear picture. I left my desk and walked into one of the small private rooms we use for focused work. After closing the door, I pulled up my full credit report. There it was. Someone had taken out a personal loan for $85,000 in my name. My hands remained steady. My breathing stayed calm. This wasn't shocking, it was confirmation. Everything from that brunch, the designer coat, the expensive condo, the constant spending, it all pointed to this. I simply hadn't wanted to accept the truth before. I called my sister. She answered immediately, her voice sugary sweet. It was the same artificial tone she uses whenever she wants to appear superior. "What's going on, Sophia?" she asked. I kept my voice even and controlled. "I received a credit alert. Did you accidentally use my information for something?" There was a brief pause, then she laughed. "My credit is awful," she said casually, "so I used yours. Relax, it's not a big deal." I closed my eyes for a moment. "That's identity theft," I replied quietly. She scoffed. "Oh my God, don't be so dramatic." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence carries more weight than shouting. In the background, I heard footsteps and another voice joining the conversation. My father had walked into the room where she was. "What's happening?" he asked. "She's freaking out about a loan," my sister said dismissively. "I used her name because her credit score is better." My father didn't react with shock. He didn't scold her or say she was wrong. Instead, he calmly replied, "It's not a crime if it's family." His tone sounded like he was explaining a simple life rule. I had to move the phone slightly away from my ear. The words didn't physically hurt, but they confirmed the fear I had been carrying for years. In their minds, my sister's desires mattered more than my security. My father sighed, clearly irritated with me. "Don't start this," he said. "You know your sister always finds a way through things, just help her out." I ended the call without saying another word. Returning to my desk, I stared at the loan documents displayed on my screen. The income listed was completely fabricated. The signature wasn't mine, it was rushed and sloppy. Whoever signed it clearly believed I would never challenge it. They were mistaken. At that moment, I didn't feel angry or frightened. I felt something much stronger: clarity. The next morning, I did what I always do when things become complicated. I focused on the facts. The background noise of printers and conversations in the office helped me stay grounded. I logged into the system and began examining the records again. This time, I wasn't investigating a stranger. I was investigating the damage someone had done to my own life. The credit file loaded slowly on my monitor. The loan had already been distributed. Payments had started, but only the minimum amount necessary to avoid drawing attention. Whoever set this up understood how to remain unnoticed. My name, my career, and my reputation were now attached to a debt I never agreed to. Leaning back in my chair, I stared at the ceiling for a moment. A brief flicker of fear passed through me. In my profession, even a small financial irregularity can destroy everything. There are no explanations, no second chances. You simply lose the career you worked years to build. My sister had put all of that at risk without a second thought. My phone vibrated again. A message from my mother appeared. "Your sister is upset. Don't make this bigger than it is." A few seconds later, another message came from my father. "Handle this quietly." Family doesn't need drama. Drama, that's what they called it. To them, it wasn't fraud or betrayal. It was just an inconvenience they wanted hidden. I didn't reply. There was nothing worth saying to people who refused to acknowledge the truth. Instead, I opened a secure folder on my computer. I didn't write an emotional complaint. I simply started documenting everything, exactly the way I do at work every single day: screenshots, timestamps, digital records preserved exactly as they appeared. I saved the falsified signature and the fabricated income information. I archived every alert notification. I even collected the social media posts where my sister proudly showed off the expensive condo she clearly couldn't afford. This wasn't about anger, it was procedure. I was building an unbreakable chain of evidence. Hours passed, and gradually the office emptied. The overhead lights dimmed until the only glow came from my computer screen. I glanced at my reflection in the dark glass. My expression looked calm, almost detached. Scrolling through the folder one final time, I knew everything inside it was undeniable. I didn't feel happy yet, but I felt prepared. I clicked the upload button. The progress bar filled in just a few seconds, a small line moving steadily across the screen, but it marked the beginning of something enormous. When the upload finished, I closed my laptop slowly and carefully. They had wanted me to stay silent. Instead, I had set something in motion that none of them could stop. The sun rose over Fairfax the next morning, casting a gentle golden light over the quiet street where my sister lived. No one knew Yeti's storm was about to break on her front door. I was not there to see it, and I did not have to be. I got a notification on my phone at 7:10 a.m. I will never forget that time. It said, "Action initiated." Field team deployed. Those are simple words, but I could see it all in my head. I could see the dark jackets and the people walking up to her door with authority. At 7:15 a.m., my phone buzzed again. It said, "Intai executed." I let out a long breath. It was not about feeling happy. It was just a feeling of the truth finally having a place to land. Later on, I heard the details of what happened. My sister was still in her silk robe when she opened the door. She was annoyed because she thought it was a neighbor or a delivery. Her face changed the second she saw the badges. She stepped back and did not know what to say. All her confidence was gone. The halls of her condo were filled with the sound of people opening drawers and taking her files and phones. I was not surprised. People who think they can do anything usually make a lot of noise when they finally get caught. By noon, my mother and father knew what happened. I could feel their anger even from my own apartment. It was like a frequency only family members can hear. When my father's name showed up on my phone, I did not pick up. I let him sit there and wonder. I wanted him to know what silence felt like when it was not my burden to carry. I got dressed and drove to their house a few hours later. I was not invited, but I knew we had to talk. I wanted to stand my ground in person. The living room at my parents' house usually felt warm, but today it felt very tight and small. My father was standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed and a tight jaw. My mother was sitting on the edge of the couch, ripping a tissue in her hands. They did not even say hello or tell me to sit down. My father asked, "What did you do?" He was not yelling, but he sounded scared. He was not scared for me. He was scared for his golden child and her reputation. I put my coat on a chair and said, "I protected myself." He yelled, "She's your sister," I told him, "and she stole my identity. She took out a loan in my name and forged my signature. She put my whole career at risk." My mother stood up and her voice was shaking. She said, "But did you have to send agents to her house? The neighbors were watching. You ruined her life." I looked her right in the eyes. I said she used my credit because she destroyed her own. She bought things she could not afford, and she lied to both of you. She lied to me too, and you want to talk about being embarrassed. My father stepped toward me. His face was red. He said, "You could have come to us. We could have handled it within the family." I almost laughed. I said, "Handled it? Like how you told me not to be dramatic, or how you said it was not a crime because we are family." He opened his mouth but then closed it. He realized how bad those words sounded now. I finally asked, "Where is she now?" My father said, "They are interviewing her." He sounded very bitter. I said, "Good." My mother started crying and asked, "How can you say that?" I told her, "Because being held responsible is the only way she will stop." She did not steal because she needed to. She did it because she thought she could get away with it. You taught her that someone else would always pay for her mistakes. I stopped talking for a moment. Then I said, "This time it was not going to be me." I walked past them toward the hallway with all the family photos. I saw my sister at her prom and at her graduation. I saw her with the keys to her first apartment. I realized there was not one photo of just me on that wall. I was always standing next to her or barely in the frame. I turned back to them. They look smaller now. I said, "You both told me to stay quiet, but silence is not love. Silence is just giving permission, and I am not giving it anymore." I left them there with the ruins of the story. They tried to write without me. Outside, the afternoon sun was very bright. The air felt cold and clear, just like it does after a big storm has passed. I drove toward the federal building to have my meeting with the investigators. While I was driving, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from a number I did not recognize. The message was short. It said, "Interview completed, evidence consistent." It was very direct and final. A few hours after that, I got a second update about what was happening at my sister's condo. The message did not list every single thing they took, but it said they had secured all the records and items related to the $85,000 loan. I did not need to know the specifics. I have spent years looking at cases like this. I know that the process is very slow and careful. It does not stop once it starts. For the first time, I felt a steady kind of relief. It was not because my sister was in trouble. It was because I had finally stopped being the person they expected me to be. I was no longer the quiet one or the daughter who just accepts everything. The next few days were very quiet. It was not the same heavy silence I grew up with. This felt much cleaner. It felt like all the sharp edges had been removed. The official update came in the middle of the week. The fake loan was tracked all the way back to the start. The paperwork was perfect, and they put the blame exactly where it belonged. My sister was not in the news, and there was no public scene. Everything moved in a private and firm way. It was enough to stop the problem and keep me safe. My mother and father did not call me. Maybe they tried, but I just let the phone ring until it went quiet. I was not trying to be mean. I just needed some space to breathe without their pressure on my shoulders. A few days later, a courier brought an envelope to my apartment. Inside were new papers for the family trust from the lawyer. My parents had changed everything. They reorganized who was in charge of the money to make sure no one could abuse it again. For the first time, they admitted in writing what they could not say out loud. They admitted that the way they raised my sister had real consequences. At work, my supervisor stopped at my desk. He tapped a folder against his hand and said, "We are forming a new group that focuses on financial abuse. I want you to be a part of it. You understand the patterns and the personal cost behind these cases." I did not give him an answer right then. I just sat there and let the offer sink in. For the first time in my life, things were not just happening to me. I was the one making the choices. In the end, what happened to my sister was not about getting revenge. It was about me finally stepping out of a role I never wanted. It was about protecting the life I built for myself. Family should not be a shield that people use to hurt you. Being quiet should not be what you have to pay to belong. If you have ever had to draw a line with someone you love, tell me about it. How did it change you? Share your story in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe so you never miss the next story.